am I talking? Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo, where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo. Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course. And man, I'm really excited about today's show because I have an incredible guest who I feel like I've just been over the years kind of seeing through random outlets and random publications and hearing his story and kind of from afar being inspired by it. And I think the way that the universe tends to work, you know, an email from his team ended up in my inbox, a few weeks ago, and I was beyond excited to be able to sit down and have a conversation with this man. So I want to bring him on, my guest today that I think is going to enlighten a lot of people and give you the ultimate story of overcoming adversity. I mean, he is, man, a jack of all trades, an Army veteran, a motivational speaker, a New York Times best-selling author. He also has some moves on the dance floor, apparently, because he won season 13 of Dancing with the Stars. And he has had this rebirth in his life that we're going to get into, you know, as a burn victim who has now made it his life's mission to spread the message of resilience and optimism. Man, I could say so many more things, but JR Martinez, how you feeling, bro?
Yo, appreciate that introduction, man. That was money.
Of course.
I might have to hit you up and see if you can come on the road with me to be like my hype man and do all the introduction. Because man, when I do, as a speaker now, I find myself in a lot of these corporate rooms and doing a lot of these, conferences, annual conferences and stuff. And sometimes the introductions don't be on point. And so it'd be great, man, to be like, they'd be like, all right, we're gonna have someone internal do an introduction. Right. Like, no. I'm good. I got my guy. Just give him a mic, give him a handheld, let him go, let him do his thing. But no, man, it's a pleasure to be here with you, man. Appreciate, you accepting, the embracing that email and reaching back out and inviting me to come on. And, the thing that really stood out to me, man, was just the title, and it was just something that really understanding what the show is about. And the title just really captivated me. And I feel like there's so many areas and spaces that we can, wrap on, as we talked about a little bit before we even hit record. So just thanks for having me, man. I'm stoked to be here.
Of course, bro. And I mean, it's an interesting time right now. And I the word interesting is, I say it loosely because there's so much going on in the world, and I was kind of debating of what I wanted to do with this episode, even maybe pushing it back because all of that happened in Buffalo, the tragedy, but I ultimately decided that I think at times like this, people need to hear words of encouragement. They need to hear, words of positivity and stories to be inspired, because I think we've all probably spent the last few days just watching the news and reading the stories and hearing more about the victims of the tragedy, the hate crime that happened in Buffalo, New York. So, I mean, obviously, I'll get to that on Thursday's episode when we talk about some of the headlines, but I thought it was important to have somebody like yourself on today's show who can possibly, uplift people a little bit and show them some of the good that does exist in this world, which I think is incredibly important.
Oh, yeah, man. No, you're absolutely right. And I think in moments like this, we all have to be willing to lean on each other. And, the thing is that we all have to be willing to, we need to be in a space of where we listen. We listen to the victims, to the family members of the victims. We listen to, what's really going on. We pay attention, and we can understand and gather our thoughts. But most importantly, I think we also then need to realize from that is we all have a voice and we all have to speak up and we all have to stand for something. And we got to say this isn't allowed. And we need to build allies, and you need allies that are from the same community as that individual that committed this horrible crime. And to be able to say, no, we don't stand for that. We don't validate that. We don't support that. And, you just need more people to be able to be vocal and just come out and just support one another. And, listen, man, I mean, it's not easy, but the thing for me, I always try and it's hard. I try is always just show from a place of love still. And despite what negativity and energy is out in the world, I'm always just trying to show from operating from a place of love and how can I be of service to somebody else, and hoping that makes a difference in somebody else's life, whether it's somebody that's thinking something negatively and thinking about doing something, or if it's somebody else that is sort of suffering from something. It's just trying to get people to understand that, listen, we're in this together, and we can all learn from one another if we're willing to just pay attention to each other.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think very well said. I think that's, I think that the core to overcoming a lot of things in life is just finding a way to let love lead you. You know what I mean? And allowing that to really be your guiding light. And I mean, I think your story is a testament to that. So I do want to get into that. For our listeners at home, normally I have a few different segments that I do on the podcast, but I kind of wanted to just clear the slate today and really just dive into your story and just have a conversation, about all that you've gone through and your mentality that has allowed you to overcome it. So, I mean, let's dive into it all, man. We're going to do it in our Mi Gente segment. Mi Gente. All right, man. So I used the word reborn at the beginning of the show, right? And I know that that's the title of your podcast as well. And it's funny, before even knowing that, just reading your story, I was like, man, this dude had a rebirth at one point in his life. And I think it's so appropriate to have your podcast title that. I mean, I think let's kind of start there, because I think most people know you right now from your new life, right? And I think that there's no way around the fact that your life was completely uprooted by a huge event that happened to you. So I mean, let's kind of start there. I think that the catalyst for all that you're doing right now, anybody that's not familiar with your story, I mean, I know you've told it 1,000,001 times, but if you can just kind of give us the rundown of kind of what happened to you and how you've sort of, I guess, gotten to this place that you're at right now.
Yeah. There's this element of rebirth. I allude to the day that I was injured, and as I do call it my rebirth. I believe
Sure.
parts of me died on that day and parts of me were born. And I think that when people hear the term rebirth, it probably gives them some sort of feeling inside, and it makes them kind of push away from that idea, because in order to have a rebirth, that implies that something has to end, something has to die in order for something to be born, right? And I've gotten to the place in my life now, 19 years removed from that tragic day, where when an opportunity ends, I don't see it as an end. I see it as, okay, where's the new opportunity? Where's the new beginning? Because there's a birth coming. That's what I pay attention to. There's a birth happening. There's something beautiful coming into this world, into my life, and that's sort of something that I've conditioned myself. And the thing that I always tell people, like, it's easy to start at 19 years old when I was injured in the military and talk about that journey. But I want people to understand that resiliency is not something that I just all of a sudden decided to have and I decided to, implement into my life. I had been building up resiliency my entire life to prepare me for that very moment to be able to overcome. And the thing is so many of us forget all the things that we go through in life that have been testing us and shaping us and challenging us and preparing us for this particular moment. But because we perceive this to be the biggest moment, we sort of disregard all the previous things that we've been through and not realize when people use the terminology and they say, I have to start over. And I'm like, you're not starting over. You already have a foundation. You already have a foundation that you've already established. You're just now building up on that foundation. So you're not starting completely from scratch. You're just now building up a new house on that structure, on that foundation. But man, so like here I am, 19 years old. I joined the military, right after high school. A couple months after high school, went to basic training, got to my unit, and which was the 101st out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, right outside of Nashville, Tennessee. And 19 years old and oblivious to the idea that one day I was going to go to war. I was sort of living my best life and just hanging out and, kicking it. And, I was living on my own. I have car, like I'm a money, like I love my mom, but she wasn't around. Like I had freedom, baby. I was like, and then I looked around and I saw these men that served in the military with me, and I was like, yo, these dudes have been all over the world, that have seen things, that have done things, and I instantly felt like I was a man just by being in their presence, And so I was just naive, man. I really was naive that I could go to war. And 6 months after I joined the military, I was on a plane heading over to the Middle East, man, going to war at the age of 19 years old. It all happened super fast. 3 months of those 6 months were me in basic training. And literally, I only had like 7 weeks to be in my unit before I got on the plane. And, man, my military career was cut very short. I always believed that I wasn't intended to remain in the military for my entire life or the 3 years that I signed up for. I
Yeah.
believe that the military was always a stepping stone to get me to where I am today.
Right.
And on the 5th of April of 2003, man, 3.5 weeks after I got to Iraq, I was driving a Humvee and the front left tire ran over a roadside bomb.
Mm.
And I immediately was trapped inside. Humvee was, engulfed in flames, and I was completely conscious. And there were several moments throughout those 5 minutes that I was trapped inside of that Humvee where I thought my life was going to end. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, my eyes would get heavy and they would start to close. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, man, it feels good to keep my eyes closed. But I could tell myself that, if you keep your eyes closed, you're giving up. There's going to be no more fight. You're going to accept death. And I would just, dude, I mean, this is one of those moments where I talk about, resiliency is something I've been practicing for a very long time, where in that moment, I had no other reason to have any other hope because, of course, I was going through this excruciating pain. But in the moment, I just kept telling myself, "No, JR, just keep fighting, man. Just keep fighting. Someone's gonna come and pull you out." And sure enough, I got pulled out of the Humvee. It started the medevac process. They put me into a medical induced coma. I was in a coma for 3 weeks, and I was brought to San Antonio, Texas, which is where the burn center for the military is, man. And I was in a coma for 3 weeks. Came out of that coma, and we talked about this. You brought up this word before we started recording, but within the first couple of weeks of coming out of this coma, I realized that both of the identities that I knew one identity that I knew for 19 years of my life, meaning the way that I looked, all of a sudden that was taken away from me. And the identity that I was starting to create for myself in the military, of being of service, of being a part of a bigger purpose and my why and all this other stuff. Now that was taken away from me because they told me I couldn't stay in the Army. And man, that's when the real war began. I mean, to be honest with you, like, because I was fighting it alone. And it wasn't just physical, it was emotional, it was mental, and I was depressed and I was angry and I was resentful. And I would tell everybody, including my moms, I was like, yo, I wish they would have just left me in the Humvee to die because I'm not going to have any life, and that's such a sad, notion and comment to make, that because I just assumed, I just honestly assumed, because I started overwhelming myself. What am I going to do with my life? What career am I ever going to meet somebody that's going to want to be with me, want to have kids? Can I even walk down the street and people, not trying to avoid me? Like, I started overwhelming myself with that. And I knew that I was alive, but I was like, I'm never going to live. It's like that, it's like that Drake song where he says, everybody dies, but not everybody lives. Right. And I just felt like, I'm gonna be alive, but am I ever gonna really live? And there's a difference. And literally, man, I was in this space for a few weeks, and what really turned it around was one day I had to simplify things, and I had to stop thinking about long term, what may or may not happen. And I started putting energy into things that I just perceived were going to happen, and yet those things never happened. And I just had to focus on the day. And when I changed my focus and put my energy into being grateful for today and surviving today and making the most of today, all of a sudden things got a little bit easier. And I was kind of like, all right, I think I can do this. I think I'll be all right.
Right. Man, you're touching on a lot of things that, like, I want to dive into, because I've recently become so obsessed with the idea of identity, right? Because I know we all fall victim of what we claim to be our identity, right? Be it our career, our looks, like you were talking about, so many different things. I mean, for me, I was in a very, like, mainstream media space. I was on The Breakfast Club, I was on huge platforms, right? And that was my identity. I am Dramos from this show, right? And even when I was unhappy doing it after a time period, I still told myself, but who are you outside of this? Like, this is who you are. You know what I mean? Like, stop complaining. This is who you are. Like, what is your life outside of that? Right. I had to take that leap of faith and be like, no, I'm not going to let this define me. But, like, there were still times amidst, even though mine was my own choice, I still had to question, like, damn, man, like, maybe the phone's not ringing as much as I thought it was going to be. Maybe that is all I was. Right. The emails aren't getting answered. The people I thought I was cool with aren't answering texts anymore. You know what I mean? Like, damn, maybe that who was who I was, and this is it, right? And I fucked up, and I mean, I just think it's interesting, because I think we the identity to us feels so foreign, right? Like we're not in control of it. Yet literally we are the only ones who are in control of it, right? We are the ones who present it to the world, right? Like we were talking before the mics turned on, like about the idea of not feeling comfortable in Latin culture, right? Because you never felt like you were, Latin enough. Your pronunciation for your Spanish speaking wasn't great, right? Same to mine. All these different things, right? And it's funny you said how it allowed you to kind of deviate from being a part of the Latin community almost, and I went through the same thing where it was almost like my own like, okay, well, fuck you guys, you don't accept me, I'm just gonna go the other way now. And then once I began to get more in touch with who I really was and embrace that, it was like everybody else just started to embrace me, right? Because I in that sense, I created my identity, and everybody else had no choice but to accept it because that's who I was giving them, right? I
Right.
mean, I think for you, when you're talking about your looks, and at that age, man, you're 19 years old, you're young. I know I've heard you talk about you had the curly hair, right? And the girls loved you, and that was kind of what you were known for, right? I mean, how do you begin to break down that process of saying to yourself, as a kid, I'm going to flip the script on who JR is, and how do you even mentally realize that that's what you have to do in order to literally survive, right? To survive the rest of your life.
For sure. Yeah. And to your point, man, it's a process. It really is a
Mm,
process. And for
yeah.
anybody listening right now to think that it's just one decision and one choice that I made, and then all of a sudden everything just kind of fell into its place and it was all
Right.
groovy from that point on, you're
Yeah.
mistaken. It's think about it like, all of us want to have sort of that nice thing in life, right? Those nice
Mhm.
things. And very few of us are in a position where we can just go like Randy Moss, straight cash, homie, and just pay for it.
Right.
Most of us are on a payment plan, and that's all right, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And but think about the nice things you want to obtain in life. You have to make payments over the
Mm,
course of every month or whatever that time frame is, over the course of
yeah.
5 years, 10 years, 30 years, if it's a crib, whatever it may be. So you got
Yeah.
to think of life as like that. Like just
Yeah.
because you make one choice or you make one decision or you do one thing that,
Mhm.
you're like, oh, I'm good now. I did my part. I paid my dues. That's not, you
Yeah.
always have to be paying your dues. And so I want people to understand, for me to get to this point where I am today, it was literally a process because it was a roller coaster ride where I would have moments where I'd be like, yo, this is me, forget everybody else. Right. And
Yeah.
I sort of, I had to develop that attitude because if
Mhm.
I just allowed myself to be consumed by other people's looks and other people's thoughts and how they define me, then I would have no life. And so I just kind of
Sure.
had to develop a little bit of like this sort of this tough mentality of like,
Right.
forget you, screw you guys. You guys don't get it. But
Yeah.
that was really me just trying to survive. I didn't know what I
Right.
was. I was just trying to survive. But then I would have these moments where I would just scream and yell and be angry at life and angry at the world. Man, I'd cry. I
Mhm.
learned how to cry as a young
Okay.
man. I mean, that was something I very rarely saw in my communities that I grew up, where I saw men crying without them drinking alcohol. Like, I got a
Mhm.
deal that
Mhm.
every time he started drinking, like he always had a tear coming down. I'm like, that's just alcohol.
Right. Right. Right.
As my uncle, he started to drink again, and then he started to cry about some shit that
Yeah. Yeah.
35 years ago I wasn't even on this earth and whatever.
Right. Right.
But like learning how to cry without even like being under the influence or anybody, you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like just being
Yeah.
comfortable with that. And so for a long time, man, it was really me just kind of just like forget everybody. It's me against the world sort of mentality, and that kind of kept
Yeah.
me alive. But then when I started to talk about identity, when I got out of the military, man, I remember hearing people tell me that, oh, you're a disabled veteran, you're a disabled veteran, you're a disabled
Mm.
veteran. And all of a sudden I didn't know what the hell a disabled veteran was. I didn't even know what a veteran was. And
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden I started realizing like, oh, okay, because of my limitations, I don't have a lot of range of motion in my hands. Like I
Mm.
can't do this, I can't do that. Like had to learn how to walk again, had to learn how to feed myself. I can't dress myself completely. I still had to,
Mm.
when I got out of the hospital after almost 3 years of being in the hospital recovering, I was
Mm.
22 and I dipped. I still had to use this tool that
Mhm.
it had like this handle, and then it had like this hook at the end, like wires. And what you
Mhm.
did is I had to put it through the loop on a shirt
Mhm.
and then grab the button. I would hook the button and then pull it through. That's how I
Wow.
got dressed, because my
Yeah.
hands. And so when they kept telling me like you're a disabled veteran, I was like, oh, well, yeah, because I can't even button my shirt. I got to use a
Mm.
tool. I got to use a device. So yeah, I'm a disabled veteran. And when you think
Mhm.
about disabled already, sort of a limitation, a negative connotation that comes along with that term. And then you hear veteran, people don't even know what the hell a veteran is. And then when they learn a little bit about a veteran, they immediately go to a veteran has PTSD, a veteran is only knows military stuff and knows how to fight. Is that veteran going to be triggered in any particular moment? That's what people go to. And so when I started reaching out to people, asking people for opportunities to speak, because now I realized this is what I want to do with my life, I kind of fell into that same category with you, where I started reaching out to people that said to me for 3 years while I was in a hospital, they'd be like, yo, here's my card. Call me. You need anything. Right. And I'm a very prideful individual. And the way I was raised, I had to be independent and have responsibility and figure it out on my own, because my mom worked the graveyard shift. At 9 years old, I had to get myself up in the morning, get myself to school, get myself home. I had to do my mom's laundry. I had to sometimes try to make dinner, and it'd be a simple thing, but I had a lot of responsibility as a young man. And so here I am now. I'm like, I'm not calling anybody. But then I was like, they said reach out for anything. So I was like, I might as well. And I would make these calls, man, and these people would be like, yeah, let's meet, let's sit down. And we'd sit down, and I'm sitting there talking and rapping to people what I think I can do and what I can bring to the table. And you know what I started noticing? People's attention span just kind of all over the place. Eyes over here, looking at something else, not really paying attention. But then at the end, they would say to me, you know what we think? We think you're probably better off, because I wanted to be a speaker. We think you're better off just maybe talking to veterans, military guys. And, and so literally they weren't listening to a word I said. I could have literally just saved my breath talking for 15, 20, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it was. And they would have said the same exact thing that they just ended up saying. And so for me, I started to realize yo, I got to stop telling people I'm a disabled veteran. And so the very thing that I was proud of, I stopped telling people I was. The thing of I'm proud that I served in our military and I was one of those that fought for our country. But then I stopped telling people because I didn't want people to all of a sudden limit me and box me in. And so I sort of rejected this notion that, I'm a veteran. And, I kind of survived a little bit. But then honestly, man, what it really came down to was, just one day I realized that you can be the most perfect, even though that's not such a thing, as we all know, but you can be perceived as the most perfect looking human being on the face of earth. Someone's always going to have something to say. Somebody's always going to have an opinion about it. And for me, I just thought to myself, am I going to sit here and put so much energy into worrying about what people think of me? Because even if I didn't have these scars on my face, on my head, and on my body, they still would say something about me. So at this point, I might as well just ignore the noise and just focus on being me and just embracing who I am and accepting who I am. And so then it became sort of this healthier process of saying, not this tough man attitude of where screw the world, me against the world. I am who I am. You like it. If you don't, piss off. I didn't have that attitude anymore. Then it just became, I'm an educator. Then it became, I'm going to teach people who I am and what I'm capable of. I have to change the way I communicate with people. I have to meet people where they are. If people don't understand who I am, well, I'm going to teach you who I am. And so then the conversation started to become, let's not focus so much on, JR, the guy that's injured and has scars. Let's focus on the JR that loves sports, that loves music, loves movies, loves different pop culture and things going on in the world, is a husband, is a father, is a this, that. Then eventually we get to all the other nonsense. But let's connect on a human level first. If we can connect on a human level first, then I think that you and I could be tied at the hip for a minute. But if we can't connect on a human level, then there's no business for you and I. And that was another thing I had to learn, man, is I had to learn not everybody's intended and meant to be in your life long term. Some people, we've heard that cliche saying, right? The seasons, they come into your life for a seasons, right? And it's true. And I just started to take control again of this is what I want my identity to be. This is who I want people to know about me. And I started to tell people, I'm a veteran. I'm proud of that. But again, before we hit that red button and we started recording, man, the thing that I didn't tell people and I don't think I did it consciously. I didn't promote the idea that I was really Hispanic and my mother's from El Salvador and my father's from Mexico, and you know, like growing up in the South, man, it was like Mexican,
right,
like, and it was like, but then I was like, well, I'm not really Mexican because my pops dipped when I was 9 months old, so I don't really claim, you know, the Mexican side, but I know I am. I more claim the Salvadorian side, but yet I didn't grow up around Salvadorians. I grew up around Mexicanos, listening to like banda music and cumbias and all these other types of music that Mexicanos tend to listen to, saying verbiage that their language. So when I went to El Salvador as a kid, like my family was like speaking to me in Spanish, and they were speaking the way Centroamericanos, Salvadoreños speak it, yet I was speaking a very different dialect, and it made me insecure. Then when I was, you know, more Mexicanos were coming in. See, I grew up in this small town, man, of Arkansas, where I was like one of the first Hispanic kids, man, predominantly white and black. And so I wasn't good enough for either one of those groups. Then there were more Hispanics, Latinos started coming into the community. I was like, all right, cool. I got my peoples. We're going to be good. Somebody trying to mess with me now. And the reality was, all of a sudden, these Mexicanos, these dudes had their little cliques, gangs, whatever you want to call them, or whatever they called themselves. They were jumping me. They were trying to mess with me, man, because they would be like, oh, eres un gringo. Like, oh, you speak English, or you were born in the States, you know, Chicano. That's the word I kept hearing growing up. And so I was like, yo, I don't fit in anywhere. Well, where do I fit in then? And so my whole life, my identity has been questioned and challenged. And I finally had gotten to a point after this injury where I just said, the hell with that, man. I am what I am. I'm going to embrace what I am. And I feel like at this stage in my life, I'm 38 years old. I feel like now at 38 years old, I'm like, yo, I'm proud to be a Latino. I'm proud to be Salvadoreño. I'm proud to say that tengo la sangre mexicana that runs through me as well. I'm proud to say that I'm Mexican as well. But I'm proud to be born in the United States. I'm proud that I'm bilingual. I'm proud that, you know, I've done all these things, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't, then guess what? The great thing about this world and about this earth, if you don't like it, or if I don't like it, guess what? There's so many more options on the menu. So find a new restaurant for you to dine in on, because it don't have to do with me.
Yeah, I love that so much, and I think one of the big things that I like made a mental note of as you're talking is the point where you stopped letting yourself be led by anger, right? Because I think anger is an incredible tool sometimes, right? It's a great motivator. I've used it myself. I mean, I credit it to a lot of my success thus far, trying to show up my parents for not believing in me, the people I grew up in, you know, this, that, and the third. But then you do get to a point where you realize that anger is leading you towards a lot of like a lack of fulfillment. You know what I mean? And you sit there thinking, I got all the things. I'm showing the people up, right? I'm sitting in this house that I just bought with you know, money that I made doing something I love, and I'm still sitting here angry. You know, I'm not completely happy. And you realize, okay, I have to kind of shift the thing that is motivating me. You know, I no longer can be doing things to show people up, to let anger rule my life, or it's just going to keep allowing me to go in this circle over and over again, and nothing will ever be enough. And I imagine that you had that moment as well, where it just clicked, like, yo, I'm doing a lot of really cool things. I'm getting to do a lot of the things that I've dreamed about doing, but like this anger is no longer serving me as the driving force.
What are you doing it for? Right? Like, what are you doing it for? Why do you do what you do every single day? Do you do it because someone tells you got to do it? Do you do it because someone relies on you? Why are you doing it? Because you have to stay busy. Like, what is it? I mean, listen, we can't ignore the time that we're in our country and the world, in the sense of where people are pegging this era as like sort of the great resignation, right? And I think there's layers to that, right? I think there's a layer in the sense of where people are a big component. People realize, I don't need to be doing this job like anymore. Like if it doesn't bring me joy and happiness, why am I sitting here like grinding like that every single day? And I am in awe of people that are in that position, because that's essentially what I've done my entire life. But to your point, man, my daughter's 10 years old, man. She plays softball. She's a pretty good ball player. I actually coach her and coach her squad. And I always tell our girls, I'm like, listen, man, first and foremost, be humble. But why do you show up at the field every day? Do you show up because your parents ask you to show up, and because they need you to stay busy and get you to do something? Or do you show up because you want to be out here? Do you show up because you like the team and you like being around in that environment? Do you like chance? Do you like being competitive? What is your reason why you show up every single day? When you walk through that fence, that gate at 5 o'clock, Mondays and Fridays for practice. And you know we're going to go to practice. Why do you show up? Why do you show up? Why are you here? And that has to be your driving force. The minute you start showing up because of other people's opinion and other people's reasons, then guess what? You're losing yourself, and you're always going to be caught up in that cycle of where you're just doing for other people. You're just essentially at that point just being led by other people. And there's no wrong with that if you're okay with that. And so the thing for me, as I always like to try to do for myself, man, as I always like to try to, I learned this when in college, and I learned this term SWOT, SWOT. And you always have to be willing to do a SWOT analysis on yourself. And what that means is, because we don't stop to have conversations with ourselves. We don't stop to sit here and feel the things that we feel and pay attention to those emotions. That's not the way we're conditioned. We're taught as people to suffer from that piñata effect. And what I mean by that is, like, how many times have you been at a party where there's a piñata, or you've seen a viral video where somebody swings and hits somebody in the face or breaks a window or whatever. Right? But think about it. The minute that someone busts that piñata open, man, and everything, all the candy falls out, what happens? All the kids just rush in to grab everything that they possibly can. They don't even know what they're grabbing.
Right.
They could be allergic to chocolate and peanut butter. And they're like, yo, I'm going to take all the chocolate and peanut butter, because that's what's in our head and our psyche. We're conditioned that we have to grab and go, and go. And so the thing is, it's important for us to do a SWOT analysis. S, what are your strengths? W, what are your weaknesses? O, what are opportunities? T, what are threats? And strengths can be perceived as an opportunity, but it also can pose as a threat. Weakness can be an opportunity, but it also can be a strength. Like, there's all these different ways. And so the point is that you always have to be willing. You got to check yourself. You got to have conversations with yourself. And I've learned that it doesn't have to be this, like, listen, I'm all about, and I think I need to figure this out, this whole meditation thing. And that's cool.
Sure.
I think it'll be beneficial for me. However, I don't have the time right now to sit. At least I know somebody listening right now is like, yo, JR, you always got time to meditate. People are going to slide in my DMs right now. Like, listen, let me tell you, you can spend 2 minutes meditating, JR. And that's true. And I'm not going to disagree with that. But my point is where it doesn't have to be this overwhelming thought process of like, yo, I got to make time and I don't have time. You can literally be driving your kids to school. You can be, you're in Jersey. You can be riding a train, right? Half of us ride the train and we put on our headphones, right? We got to block out all that nonsense on the train. So, you know, wherever you are, you walk into the store, wherever you're going, do a SWOT analysis. Don't just do it once every year, like New Year's Eve. And then you're like, that's really my thing for the year. No, do it January 1st, do it January 7th, because what is your SWOT analysis? What's perceived as a strength, a weakness, opportunity, threat today is going to change by Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's always going to change because the world is constantly changing. But if you're always rooted and listen, man, and sorry, I don't mean to like have this long-winded like
no, bro, go ahead.
But the thing that for a long time, when I got out of the military, I loved this concept of service. I loved the military taught me to serve and give back and be a part of something bigger than myself. And I love that. And I found that I can still do that by being a speaker. And I wanted to continue to just do that and exercise that. The problem was when I got a little bit of, success and, I started all of a sudden getting booked everywhere. What happened is I got sucked into that piñata effect. People on my team were like, yo, you got to do X amount of dates a year. Yo, you got to make X amount of dollars a year. Yes. I'm looking at my bank account and I'm like, ooh, I'm about to cash in on this. I'm about to hit this number. I'm about to hit that number. I'm just watching it go and go and go. And then what happened was I got away from the very reason why I even started doing this. I was now chasing the dollars. I was now chasing, being, sort of this validation that I'm one of the busiest speakers and the most booked speakers out there on the market. And I got away from it. And then what happened? It all went away. I got checked. Yeah. Whether you think God or life or whatever, I got checked. It all went away. People stopped buzzing me. People stopped sending me emails. And I realized I got away from that. And so needless to say, what I started to do is I started to say, you know what? No, I got to get back to why I do what I do every single day. And the minute that I got back into that, things started picking back up. But again, I'm human, man. I'm human, just like everybody else listening right now. And even though I've learned that lesson, I've also forgotten it many times over.
Yes.
And then that's why it's so important to be like, yo. And so I had to have a conversation with myself at the end of last year, 2021. Yeah. There were some things I realized I was trying to make up for all this lost time of COVID. And I realized I was overwhelming myself. And I started thinking to myself, but am I even enjoying the process? Am I even really connecting with people on a human level? Or am I just thinking like, okay, it's one more person I got to talk to. Okay, cool. All right, next person. Is it just a number at that point?
Right.
And so I made the conscious decision at the beginning of 2022. I'm not going to overwhelm myself. I'm not going to be chasing the dollar. I'm not going to be chasing X amount of events a year. I'm just going to sit here and focus on what I know I do well, why I do it. And the numbers will follow. Everything else will follow. So the question to your listeners is why do you do what you do? Whatever it is that you do. I don't care what it is. You don't have to be a CEO. You don't have to be a CFO. You don't have to be some executive at the C-suite level. Like, you could be somebody that works at a department store. You could be in retail. You could be a barista. Why do you do what you do every single day? And that should always be your driving force.
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting on so much shit that's resonating with me personally, and so many things that I've been having conversations with like other friends. But I think first and foremost, you're right. The conversations with yourself are so incredibly important, you know. And I think we all have different ways of doing it. I don't ever want to be like, okay, this is the only way to do it. Meditation is the only way. This is the only way, right? It's whatever works for you. I journal every morning, you know, and some days it's nonsense. Some days it's profound ideas. Some days I really touch into what I'm feeling, you know. But I mean, like you said, I think I have great ideas or great conversations with myself while I'm driving sometimes, you know, and that helps me figure shit out. And then I think the other thing that you talk about, the reality is you can tell yourself right now, say you're working, I don't know, you're making $50,000 a year at your job, right? And you can tell yourself, listen, I'm gonna grind and hustle and bust my ass, and as soon as I make $100,000 a year, I'm good. Like I'll start, you know, prioritizing my family more. I'll start prioritizing my health more. But the reality is, when you get that $100,000, it doesn't feel as big as $100,000 anymore, right? Like then it's like, well, maybe 200,000, right? And that's it, so it eventually can never be enough. So you have to be very real with yourself about kind of setting those guidelines and those ways to remember, this is why I started doing this. This was the goal, right? The goal was to have more free time. The goal was to set myself up to do this, that, and the third, right?
It's crazy, man, because we're always trying to keep up, right? The term is keep up with the Joneses, but we're always trying to keep up with somebody else. Man, this is crazy. Like, so my father, like I said, left when I was 9 months old. 3 years ago, I actually met him for the first time, and he was in Mexico. So my pops came over to the States, met my mom, had me. My pops dipped, ended up having other kids, dipping on those kids. My pops got into a lot of trouble, drinking. He got into, you know, just jail and stuff. And so eventually he got punished and he got revoked on his status from being able to come to the States. It was revoked and he was sent back to Mexico, deported back to Mexico, and was told the first time, I think he was punished for like X amount of years, but then he came back. And then he got in trouble, and then they're like, all right, dude, you can never come back to the States. So my pops is actually homeless. He's like, he lives like literally sleeps on this lady's front porch, walks with a lamp, all that stuff, man. It's messed up. But the thing is that I remember like when I had the opportunity to meet him, you know, it was like in this really rundown, you know, part of Monterrey, Mexico. And it was crazy because when we were leaving, there were two young people sitting at like this picnic table. And my dad, which is kind of weird to say, but my dad, he goes up to them and he's like, hey, this is my son. This is my son. Like bragging about me, right? First of all, he's calling me mijo, which I'm not comfortable with the man calling me mijo. And also he's like, mijo, mijo. And I'm like, oh man, like that's too soon, right? Too much too soon. But when I said hi to these people, you know, we didn't talk. I just kind of said hello. When I noticed, man, these people live, you know, listen, man, they don't really have a lot. I'm not going to, you know, they don't have really anything. But you know what they did have? They had that fake Louis bag sitting right there. And I'm just sitting there like thinking to myself, yo, like we are so warped in what we put value in. And what we're all chasing and what we're pursuing. I'm not saying you can't have nice things, right? Like I get it, but I'm like, that's what you want to put your few bucks, you know, into is that instead of trying to figure out how can I get out of this? And we just, unfortunately, our North Star is in some cases is somebody else's North Star. And so what happens is we don't have a direct path to get to our North Star because we don't know what it is. So we're following other people's North Star, and then we end up doing this. This is the route we take to get.
Well, I mean, that's what media is doing to us since a young age, right? Like we're sold, right? We're just being sold, oh, buy this and you'll be happy, right? And there's never a mainstream conversation about like, listen, if you are not in a great position financially or not even just where you want to be, and you're still sitting there buying a bunch of frivolous shit to make yourself feel better, you probably need to have a conversation with yourself. Why do I even feel the need to do that, right? What void, what emptiness am I trying to fill? But we're not taught that, right? We're just sold these asinine dreams of the white picket fence and this job and the wife and the kids. And once you get that, everything is fine, right? But you know, we're not taught to do some of that self-work, that healing, right? And I mean,
and I gotta tell you, man, that has been the thing that has saved my life, because here's the other thing, right? My mother has experienced a lot of trauma in her life. My mother's never dealt with the trauma in her life. So unfortunately, my mother has projected a lot of that trauma onto me. When I was a kid, she was always displacing it onto me. So my mother guilted me because she's experienced loss. So she guilted me never to leave her side, to never go out into the world, to stay right here, because that was the only thing that brought her comfort and solace. And I just remember I was conditioned to be like, when my mom's not happy, I got to make everything right. I got to fix it. And, you know, my mom never cried in a very, you know, and it always, you know, it was kind of like what I said about my uncle. Like, you know, he started crying when he was drinking, and my mother always cried when she was angry. And it was like, we need to practice some crying, like when you're not into that space, right? We need to and so I was never taught to like talk to yourself and get help and figure it out. And I didn't realize that, honestly, man, until about I'd say about 4 years after I was injured. It was 2007. And dude, when I tell you I got out of the military and I kept experiencing a lot of rejection, and I was 22, 23, 24, man, I started drinking. I started being reckless. I started being angry. I would drink and I'd get behind the wheel, man. I'm not proud of that. And I know there's people listening right now that are like, you know, hopefully, you know, probably have a horrible experience with that. And I'm not proud of that. And I was just hurt. And one day my best friend, man, he literally sat down. He said, dude, you need to cry. And I was like, what are you talking about? Cry? I don't need to cry. He's like, yeah, you need to cry, man. And literally he just kept telling me to cry. And I just started crying. Like, I just started crying, man. I didn't even know why I was crying. And he said, man, you've healed physically. You haven't healed emotionally and mentally. And it was that moment that I realized that, one, I needed to really start spending time with myself. I needed to start having conversations with myself. I needed to start learning how to listen to myself. We are so conditioned that most of our definitions of a conversation consist of you speaking 50% of the time and me speaking 50% of the time.
Right.
And what I've learned is that a conversation can consist of you speaking 90% of the time, and I only speak for 10, but I spend 90 listening to you. Right. And in this exchange, I needed to listen to you. You needed someone to listen to you. So it's cool that I gave you 90 and only spoke for 10. Maybe the next time we connect, maybe then I speak 90 and you listen for 90. Right. But this element of where I am today and how I've been able to break a lot of cycles is all attributed to this element of, like, I spend so much time listening to myself, having conversations with myself. The fact that, you know, my wife and I had to split up. We had to break up after our first daughter, you know, first child was born. Like, it wasn't pretty. But we found our way back to each other because we did the internal work that we needed to do individually and then collectively. And now here we are with the little man, you know, a 9-month-old in the house right now. And we got 2 beautiful kids. I'm breaking cycles, man. I'm married. I'm proud. I'm happy to be married. Like, there was a point in my life where I never had an example of marriage and what that looked like. Right. And, you know, sort of the old school way of what marriage is. And it's like the woman does this and the man does this, and that's what it is. And, you know, for me, I'm always pushing my wife, go try some stuff, go do some stuff, whatever you want to go try it. And, you know, I'm proud of the things that I've accomplished, from as far as the things that you alluded to in the introduction, and those things are cool. But the biggest thing that I'm proud of, man, is the fact that I've been able to break generational curses, that I've been able to show my kids that I don't have all of the answers, that I've been able to show my kids that I'm down to cry if something hurts daddy for whatever reason, that I'm willing to ask for help, that I'm willing to talk to my kids and say, hell, help me understand this, because your kids are your biggest teachers, man. And that's my legacy, my kids, that's my legacy. And if I can just break the cycle and not displace and not bring in a lot of my childhood trauma or trauma in general and bring and put it onto them, and just allow them to be kids and allow them to understand the importance of communication and talking. I mean, that's everything, man. To the point where my daughter now, she told me not too long ago, she's like, Daddy, I just want you to know you said something that hurt my feelings. And I immediately went to, well, you took it the wrong way.
Right.
And then I caught myself and I was like, no, JR, no, her feelings are valid. And so I came to her, I said, listen, baby girl, I'm sorry. Your feelings are valid. And I'll be more mindful or whatever. And guess what? We were good. But she was 9 years old when she came up to me and told me that. And to have a 9-year-old feel comfortable enough to express that to me, but me to receive it.
Right. But that's the other thing, though, because that you created a space where she felt comfortable doing that. Right. And I mean, I could speak to my own situation and a lot of other Latinos. Like, we're not the type who have those real conversations. It's like what your parents say, go. And if you question anything, it's looked at as a sign of disrespect, right? So there is no two-way street for a conversation about
There's no dialogue.
Right. No, not at all. So, I mean, that's huge. And I love that you're talking about the idea of breaking generational curses, because that's such a passion of mine as well. And I mean, man, you're touching on a lot of things. I have a couple things I want to just like get to, because I feel like you're really just dropping so many gems. But I think the one thing that's so profound to me, talking to you, is that you're, acknowledging that this is all an ongoing, never-ending journey of the human experience, right? I think one of my biggest things that I hate about the self-help world, and as much as it's to its credit has given me, a lot of really valuable information, it also tends to read like a movie script where you have like, this beginning, you have the conflict, then you have the end that's a resolution, and everybody lives happily ever after, right?
Yeah.
And you don't often hear people talking about like, listen, man, I fell off the horse a few times, even after discovering this, right? I got away from my good path and veered back into that bad one for a little bit. And then I had to remind myself of all that I've learned, right? And I think that a lot of people probably feel a lot of shame when they hear these things, because they're like, shit, why can't I know what to do. I know what's right. I know what works for me. For whatever reason, I just keep slipping every once in a while and like undoing some of that great work that I've done. And I think a lot of people don't realize that's part of the human experience, right? There's no perfection here.
And again, I think it's Brene Brown that says, in vulnerability, you find community. And I'm all about being vulnerable. I'm all about being like real and raw and just authentically who I am, because I believe that's how you really connect with people, and people find that they can actually relate to you and connect with you on a deeper level versus the surface stuff about like, how's the weather? And it's like, no, let's connect. And so, after dancing, man, and I wrote a book, speaking all over the world, man, I remember getting to a point where I made over $1 million. Yo, my mother made $36,000 a year as a kid. Like, I was making that in some cases in a week. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm building up to something here. That's the life I created for myself. So first of all, if you want to sit here and be like, yo, something that's inspiring is like, I went from literally being in a hospital, my mother making $36,000 a year, and being in an environment where there's a lot of drugs and gangs and violence and not a lot of ambition to have opportunity. And yet I was able to create something for myself to the point where I remember crossing over into $1 million for myself. But going back to that point where I got away from it, because I got away from it, literally, man, I'm going to tell you something. It got to a point where I literally was broke. All that $1 million. You know what I did? First of all, I bought my mom a crib. Like, I took care of my mom. I did that. Yeah. I was paying off all the family stuff and taking care of people. Right. I had my daughter I took care of. Like, I was doing all these things. Right. And all of a sudden the events stopped coming through, gigs stopped coming through. I would get by month to month. I was like, as if I was my mom living at $36,000 salary. Like, now I was just going check to check. and I would like charge a lot of things. I was putting things on credit, right? And opening up another card and trying to get a bigger credit limit. This is after I was on Dancing with the Stars. This is after I wrote a New York Times bestselling book. This is after I spoke at the big Fortune 550 companies. Like, this is after all that. I was broke and I was stressed out about like, yo. And then there's a couple things that I realized. Not only did I get away from why I was doing it, but I also had to get away from this notion of it ain't my responsibility to fix everybody else's problem.
Sure. Yeah.
Mom, I love you. I love my mom. I love my mom. Right. But my mom also, because she never dealt with anything, she always projected onto me this element of where you got to do for me. You got to do for me. You got to fix this. You got to fill this void. And I said, well, that's not fair. You're not even treating me like a human being and saying thank you. And I appreciate you, son, and all this other stuff. You're just kind of taking advantage of it. You're abusing it. And it makes me feel like you don't even care about what I do for you. Right. And I finally got to a point where I said, you know what? I got to set up boundaries. I got to put up boundaries with people. I got to put a boundary with my family that lives in El Salvador that are like, yo, send us money, send us $1,000 a month, send us X amount of dollars a month. I'm like, yeah. And I would do it for a long time. What do you guys need? Oh, you need electricity in your house? Okay, cool. I'm going to do it. Right. And that's fine.
Yeah.
But this natural expectation, this natural entitlement was what I didn't get. And then when I went to therapy is when I realized, okay, I'm broke because I got away from the very thing that we've been talking about. I'm broke because I don't have boundaries, and I need to set up boundaries, even with my mother. And I started to tell my mother, like, yo, mom, I can't, or I can. All right, cool. I can up to a certain point. Family. It's not my responsibility to look after you guys up to a certain point. I've given you guys a lot of, okay. And once I started doing that, now I'm back in this place in my life where guess what? I've built up my cash. I'm good. I'm comfortable, but that's not what I'm chasing. Yeah. And a lot of people don't know that I went from making literally $1 million to all of a sudden literally having pennies in my bank account every single month for a while. And the only thing that saved me was at that time I was living with my best friend. I was living with him because I was sort of in this transition between like gigs or whatever. And he was like, dude, you ain't got to pay me nothing. Thank God because then I would have been like, I got no money to give. Like I'm not even exaggerating because I want people to be like, oh, wow. Like, where some people are like, yo, I grew up in a bad area. And, like, no, you didn't. I know what side of the tracks you grew up on. Like, I'm being real and honest. Like, I barely was making enough to pay people that I worked with to do things that I still needed them to do. But that's the part of the story that people don't realize. And for me, I know it's a process. I know everything is it's literally one step at a time. And I don't overwhelm myself or put a lot of energy into things that I don't know are going to become true or not. Like I don't waste my energy on that stuff. I waste my energy on what's going on in this very moment. So for example, when COVID went down, all my events started canceling, in April, May, June, all of a sudden, October, November, December dates are canceling. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm losing, all these events. My team is freaking out. My wife is freaking out. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? I said, it's good. It's all good. Don't worry about it. Don't sweat it. We're going to be all right. You know what I did? I figured out how to use this camera. I figured out how to use this lighting stuff. I figured out how to get them. I figured I went back to, instead of Wi-Fi, I went to Ethernet, the old school to connect so I can have good, reliable connection.
Yes.
That's what I focused on. And because I did that around June-ish of 2020, my agent started calling me. Hey, are you comfortable doing virtuals? Comfortable? Man, I've been troubleshooting this stuff for the last 2 months. I'm money. Let's go. And they're like, all right, cool. Dude, I made probably more money and was the busiest I had been in such a long time just because I was focusing on a solution and focusing on what can I do in this moment to set myself up for success, to the point where I was just I would do, dude, 2-3 virtuals in a day. If it wasn't COVID, I would never have the ability to be able to do more than one event in a day unless it was the same city, which was rare.
But that's that. But to me, that what you're talking about is, and I love that you brought this up even before your rebirth, you had set the groundwork to have that mindset in general, right? So like
Yeah,
what you're saying is the ability to bounce back no matter what happens that is unplanned, right? The ability to readapt, to pivot, right? Which pivoting is probably one of the most like underrated capabilities that any human being could have, right? I
absolutely.
mean, your story about playing football when you were younger and that being the goal, right? Like that, and then you get hurt, and then you decide to pivot. I'm going to join the military, right? And then that like leads to this tragedy. But then out of this tragedy, you figure out a way to pivot once again. Like that's what you're talking about is this constant like ability to kind of recalibrate, right? And I think what you were talking about there that was so profound to me is it's your story is, a very extreme way of showcasing in real life the ability to, make something out of nothing no matter what happens. And that every single thing that happens to you, good or bad, prepares you for that next moment, right? And
Yeah,
and that's why I love that idea that you were talking about. Like you see all these things as rebirths, and that you don't see when something doesn't happen or it ends, you don't see it as an end, you see it as the opportunity to be reborn again. And I think that man, that is like the fucking gem of all gems right there, right? Like if you can flip any bad situation, just be like, yo, this is not planned and I accept that, but this is now an opportunity to make something even fucking better, right? Like that to
that's the
me is
word.
like right there. Yeah. I mean that to me, when I hear your story, that's what I'm seeing over and over again. That's what I want people to understand.
And honestly, man, like I open myself up to the universe so much, and I perceive
Mm,
every opportunity I get to connect with somebody one on one or
Yeah.
virtually, like you and I are doing right now. An
Yeah.
opportunity to do a speaking engagement, an opportunity to, to talk to a stranger. It's an
mm,
opportunity for either
Mm-hmm.
me to give them what they potentially need in that moment in their life,
mhm,
or for them to give me what I need in that moment. I'll tell you a quick story, man. I had this really cool
Yeah.
experience a few years ago. When I travel, I tend to be a Delta snob. I love my Delta Airlines, and and I got an opportunity to go to Atlanta and speak at Delta, and I was feeling myself. I got on the plane coming back home, and I was like, "Yo, I
Mm-hmm.
killed it. That was money. Like I got
Yeah.
a chance to speak at Delta. I was on this high, and all of a sudden, something on the plane just triggered me. And all
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden, by the time I got off the plane, I was in a sour mood. But normally I call my wife, let her know, hey, I'm on the ground, whatever. But I didn't call her. I was like, I need a moment. I'm gonna drive home and just be to myself. I get in my
Mm-hmm.
car because I park at the airport. I get to the booth to pay. I don't even look at the attendant. I just hand my ticket out the window, and the person grabs the ticket but doesn't take it. And so it seems like a couple seconds, and I finally look over and I look up at the person, and it's an older lady, and she's looking at me and she says, "What happened to you?"
mm,
And I said, I was burned. And she said, how did it happen? And I said, oh, I was in a car accident. And he just kept it simple. She said, is it your entire body? I said, yeah, most of my body. And she said, oh, can I pray for you? And I was like,
mm,
all right, cool. So, she does a little prayer quietly. And then all of a sudden I
mhm,
see her writing. And I was like, all right, cool. Now she's doing the transaction, right? We're good. I'm going to pay and I'm going to move on with my life. She writes, she's writing, she's writing. Well, all of a sudden she hands me a ticket back. And that's
mm,
not the normal process. So she hands me a ticket. I look at the ticket, and she says, and she wrote on the ticket, and I'm going to show you right now. Right
mm,
This is how this moment still sits with me to this day. So she writes on that ticket, and I know it's going to be backwards because of
Mm-hmm.
right, but she says, Amitoba. She
mm,
says, are you familiar with Buddhism? I said, not really. She's like, all right, well, there's a Buddhist saint called Amitoba, a saint in Komitoba, and it represents infinite light, infinite wisdom.
mm,
When I see you, I see Amitoba because you represent this, you represent that. Now think about this, man. But then all of a sudden, I'm like, yo, my energy starts going away. I start feeling good again. All of a sudden, I pay. Think about the metaphor about this, right? I feel good. I embraced and opened myself up to this interaction, this exchange with this stranger. And then what happened? I couldn't pass through this gate until I paid.
Mm-hmm.
But because I opened myself into this exchange, the gate opened up and I was able to go through.
mm,
That's life, right?
Yeah.
I could have very easily 5 times through that interaction with her when she asked me what happened. I don't want to tell you. Is
Right.
your whole body? I don't want to tell you. Can I pray from you? No. Do you know
Right.
what a mitabai is? I don't know and I don't care. All right, well, let me tell you, you represent this. Cool, but not for me. I could have had so many opportunities to shoot her down and be like, this is nonsense. But I've learned over the course of my life, everything you experience and every interaction that you have in life is an opportunity to learn something about yourself, about the world, about that individual you're interacting with. And so for me, that's just the way I live my life, man. Everything is about what am I learning in this moment? And it's not stressful. It's not. Some people may think it's a lot of work, Jr. It's stressful. It ain't stressful. Because you know what? I'm constantly getting my tank filled by all of these beautiful experiences that I get to have. And I feel valid and I feel excited to go and conquer the world and see what's out there or whatever. So I just encourage people, listen, man, be open to the opportunity to interact with a brand new person. Be that person, be the infinite light, be the infinite wisdom, but also be open to receiving that from a complete stranger that sees you at the store, at the train, or wherever the hell you are. Yeah. Because that's the ability that every single one of us have, as long as we're willing to see it that way.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. Opportunity is the key word there, right? You know, you don't know where any interaction, any meeting, anything might lead you, right? And to always understand there's an opportunity there, and to allow yourself to view it with that mindset and that sort of softness that you have to see. I think it is such profound advice. I mean, I think the last thing I want to end on is this quote from you where you say, "Scars are like tattoos with better stories," right? And man, I first of all, I love that quote, but I also think, to me, it speaks to something that I have been pushing, is this idea that authenticity is your superpower, right? And you are a breathing testament to that, right? Because you look at, the reality is your story nobody else could tell, right? Some of the acting roles that you've gotten, nobody else could play those parts except for you, right? And like there's such beauty in that, right? Like you went and just embraced this new version of yourself, and you were able to then make, so much of all the opportunities that become uniquely yours because you're living authentically, right? And that is such a superpower in itself.
But man, and I said this to somebody the other day. I had this man come up to me, and who was burned. He had an accident, and we connected on that level. And I said, listen, man, first and foremost, you got to understand you're not a burn victim, you're a burn survivor. The moment it happens, you're a victim. Every moment after that, you're surviving. And I was like, even if it's not the prettiest way, you're still alive. You're here. You're surviving. And I said to him, I said, man, he talking about accepting his scars and this. And I said, listen, man, me accepting my scars, me accepting what's on my body, I understand. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of when I wear sleeveless shirts all the time, man. I want people to see the 3rd-degree burns on my arms. I want people to see what I've been through. I can't hide my face, but I still want people to see that.
Yeah.
And because I've embraced it, man, there was a point, and you're kind of in my office space right now, and this is kind of crazy because before COVID, you decorate your office, with all this stuff and whatever, and then virtual world now, all of a sudden people are in your office and they're looking, they're like, what you got back there? What's that thing back there?
Right.
I forget that it's back there, but here's the crazy thing, man. So like on the plaque right there, that's me on the cover of People magazine once upon a time in my life. The editor told me later, he's like, magazine sales were suffering for a long time. Your cover was actually one of the highest grossing covers that we've had. And I forgot the time period, but it had been a minute. And then somewhere over here is me listed as one of the sexiest men alive. Now, when they called me about that, I was like, what? Like, I remember and that was 10 years after I was injured. I remember 10 years before, I was in a room crying and just thinking to myself, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to find somebody, be considered attractive, be considered handsome, let alone be considered sexy. Hell no, that's never going to be a part of my life. But what I learned is what people love somebody that's authentic. People love somebody that's just real and raw. People love that are just trying to be vulnerable and just trying to survive every single day. That's what's sexy. It's not just surface stuff. It's depth, baby. And for me, I feel like I got depth. I feel like I figured it out now. And I feel like to the point where sexy isn't necessarily just, don't get me wrong. It's like, I used to love singing this song of Lil Wayne. And he says, what's that song what he did with Destiny Childs and T.I. and a soldier.
Oh yeah, so
I done sold it. But he says something in that song where he says a body marked up like a subway in Harlem. And every time he would say that and I would sing and I would just be like, yo, I would look at my scars and be like, yo, my body's marked up. I love it. I embrace that this is who I am. This is what I am. And because I come across that way, like I embrace it, people see that as sexy. My wife's a Queens girl, born and raised. You know, she never thought she was going to be, she dated her whole life dudes that were like 6 and forever height. Yeah. And she started dating a dude that's 5'9", that she was only around Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, you know, her entire life, and maybe some Cubans here and there because, you know, how the Northeast is. And also she got with a Mexican Salvadorian, you know, like, but you know what? She says she's always attracted to me just because of my confidence and the way I present myself and the way I show up, and and that's what I've learned is the real thing that we should all be striving for, is what really is on the inside of you. And so, you know, man, I just listen, man, I really appreciate the opportunity to rap with you and share a little bit about my story with your listeners. And I think that you and I will be connected for a minute. You know, but you know, man, it's, I want people to understand something, right? I'm not sure when this is going to air and, you know, but right now we're recording this. Oh shit. Okay. This is Mental Health Awareness Month, ladies and gentlemen. Right. So let's wrap on this for a second. What I want people to understand is the power of the mind. In 2000, when I was 16 years old, because I couldn't figure out where I fit in and where I belonged. You know what I told my mom one day? She caught me crying in my room, and I told her, sometimes I think about getting into a car accident just because I want to see how many people give a shit, just because I want to see how many people would show up. Listen, man, we're 2022. If we heard a 16-year-old say those very words, we all probably, hopefully, would respond and react differently and be like, yo, you okay? We got to figure this out. Right. My mom, all she knew was to be like, I love you, give you a hug, let's go eat something, right? That was what my mom knew to do.
Let's pray about it.
Exactly. 3 years later, I was in a car accident, not a traditional car accident, but I was in a car accident. Guess what I found out, Joe? I found out how many people actually care about me. In 2003, when I was in the hospital recovering, every evening, it was free time for my mom and I just to kind of talk, watch TV, hang out. My mom would always put on novelas, put on novelas. And then, you know, like novelas, man, you can just watch 1 hour and all of a sudden you're hooked. And then I know what she did to him. I know what he did to her. I know who's trying to do what. And I remember jokingly telling my mom, one day I'm going to be on a soap opera. Clowning. She said, oh, really? She said, what's the storyline going to be? I was like, I don't know. I'm going to have me a fly, honey, a love interest. That's all I joked around about. 5 years later, I was on a soap opera. Not a novella, but an American all my children soap opera. The reason I tell this story, man, the power of the mind. What you tell yourself, what you feed your mind, what you feed your heart, what you feed your soul, believe it, my friends, good, bad, indifferent, it can happen. And so you got to choose your words carefully. You got to choose your thoughts carefully. And if you're 16 and you have those thoughts, and if you're 47 and you have those thoughts, and if you're anywhere in between on either end of it, I want you to understand you're not alone. I still, to this day, I got my people that I know I can tap and be like, yo, I need to rap about something. I need to talk about something. I'm not there right now. My energies aren't connected. And they listen and they help me reconnect my energy. I plead to you, if you have those thoughts, if you struggle from time to time, it's perfectly okay. You're normal. Find your people, but you only find your people if you're willing to be vulnerable. As Brene Brown says, in that vulnerability, you find community. And I just want people, especially Latinos, if Latinos are listening right now, listen, it's not what we're trained and conditioned to do, but we have the opportunity to be the one to set the precedents moving forward for our family, for our culture, for our peoples. And we have to be willing to embrace that. So just wanted to plug that real quick, because I think it's so important for people to understand that I too had negative thoughts. And I was in the very thing that I wanted to happen. I also had positive thoughts, and the very thing that I wanted to happen happened. What are you going to feed yourself?
I love that, my bro. What a powerful way to end. Where can people follow you, man? First of all, I want to say I appreciate this conversation, but I want people to go and check out all that you're doing, all that you're working on, because I just think that, having a mentor like this in your life, even if it's not necessarily somebody you physically know, but just being able to hear these types of conversations on a regular basis is incredibly important. So I mean, push the people to where they can check you out and follow all that you're doing.
Yeah, appreciate you, brother. I mean, you can just hit me up on Instagram. I am JR Martinez. From there, there's a connection to my website, which is jrmartinez.com. But the biggest thing, man, is I love to connect with people. So if you just want to hit me up and just say, yo, I heard you on Life as a Gringo, and just share some love and just ask a question or whatever, come hit me up. I love the opportunity to interact with people. So just thank you for the love, man. And I just hope that people are out there listening, are able to take something away from this conversation that you and I have had.
Absolutely. I mean, I've taken something away from it, and this is what I do for a living. So I mean, I can only imagine people at home, man. So I thank you so much for your time and for your vulnerability, man, for real.
Yeah, appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much. Keep up the great work, man.
Man, big shout out to my guest this week, JR Martinez. A really moving conversation. I feel like I personally took a lot out of that. I can imagine that other people, I'm sure it resonated with them, his story, his vulnerability. And I think, man, so much I want to kind of encapsulate. So let's do that. We'll kind of tie everything we talked about in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for Conclusion Stew.
Man, so I think for me, I'm incredibly moved by this conversation for a number of reasons, but I think one of the big takeaways I have to point out is JR talking about, even after all that he's gone through, all that he has to be grateful for when it comes to his life and now this career that has transpired as a result of this really horrific incident that he went through. It was refreshing to hear him say he still has his bad days, right? He talks about being on that plane and just, getting in a bad mood afterwards after he felt he just killed it at this huge conference, and, talking about, some of the marital issues he went through with his wife and having to overcome that and all of the above, right? I just think that that's so incredibly important because we're in this age of everybody's a self-help guru, right? Everybody's giving out advice and listen, myself guilty as charged. But I think it's incredibly important, and I try and make it a point for myself, to show you that it's not always sunshine and rainbows, that there are, deviations, that at times, even when what you should be doing, you sometimes end up doing the opposite, or you sometimes forget all that you've learned and you have to kind of realign yourself with your values, once again. When I did the Hoffman process, the personal growth retreat, they talk about, your left and your right road, and your right road being kind of your ideal road, who you want to be, and the left road, being the negative road, right? All that happens, all the negative patterns that you have in your life, all the negative emotions and things that you don't want as a part of your life. And that the analogy that I heard, and I think I talked about this on the episode, was, the goal isn't to just be walking on that right road at all times, to be on that good road at all times, because that's just not realistic for us as humans. But the goal should be that pendulum that just swings, right? And it's going to swing to the left road every once in a while. And the hope is that it's just swinging towards the right just a bit more, or that it's at least sort of balanced in the middle. And that's the sort of realistic goal when it comes to being a human being. We are all going to do so much self-help work, some spiritual work. And I just, speaking for the general people who listen to this, I'd imagine a lot of you listen to podcasts or read books or have some sort of self-help interest in your mind. And I know it's really easy, and I say that from my own personal experience, that you think to yourself sometimes, shit, I've gone through so much personal growth work, and I still have days where I wake up feeling depressed. I still have days where I lash out at people, where I get angry, where I get sad, where I get anxiety, any of the other things that I'm working on, right? Or the days that I don't feel like I'm good enough. I still have those days. And it's a battle, but you can't shame yourself for that. You observe it. What is causing this feeling today? What happened that is making me think this way today? But I'm not going to shame myself for having the human experience, right? It's a part of the journey. We're going to have our good days. We're going to have our bad days, and that's okay. The idea is that you are just motivated enough and that you have conversations with yourself enough that you're then able to recognize when you need to give yourself that extra push to get back on, your right road. And I think to me, that was one of the more profound things to take away from this conversation. And then lastly, I think the one thing he said was being able to look at every situation, if it like an end of a job or an end of this or an end of that, as the opportunity to be reborn again now, right? The opportunity to do something else. And I think that's such a beautiful way to look at it. Nothing ends, everything just becomes reborn, right? I'm obviously loosely paraphrasing and not saying it as eloquently as JR does, but when you can look at things like that in your life, when you can look at a door being slammed in your face, a no coming through from a job, or getting fired from a job, and then look at it as, what is the opportunity here? What am I now able to be freed up to explore that I wouldn't have been had this thing have kept going on, right? And I think that's the really important way to reframe your mind, or look at his situation, a really horrific accident, but he went through the human experience of feeling bad for himself and getting angry and all of the above, but then he saw the opportunity in it, and that's what he ran with. And I love that quote, scars are like tattoos with better stories, right? And he now made his scars something to be proud of, right? He understood that this is now his superpower, that this gives him the ability to do things that nobody else on this earth are qualified to do, to hold positions, to hold acting roles, to have conversations that other people are not qualified to have. And he is the only one. He is the specialist on this, because he is truly embracing his unique authenticity. And we all have that in us. We all have something in us that is completely unique to just us. And that's something, man, I love for everybody to keep in mind. Now I'm going to give his social once again. It's at I am JR Martinez on Instagram. And man, I just love this conversation with him, and I'm really moved by it. And it's definitely one that I think I'm going to probably re-listen to just keep catching some of those gems that he shared. So man, thank you, JR, for hopping on, and thank y'all so much for participating. If something resonated with you, please, DM me, comment, whatever it is. I'd love to hear what part of this, moved you and made you feel something. And man, we'll be back on Thursday, and we'll get into a lot of the stuff that's going on in the world right now, as heavy as it is. I hope that this was a welcome break from it. And brought you a little bit of positivity and hopefulness, I should say, in your day. I know it definitely energized me a bit, but we do have to face the demons of the world, and we'll do that on Thursday as we break down the headlines for our Thursday Trends episode. With that said, man, enjoy your week in the meantime, and leave us a review if any of this is resonating with you wherever you're listening. If you could leave us 5 stars, I'd greatly appreciate it. I'll catch y'all on Thursday for our Thursday Trends episode. Until then, stay safe. Peace.